Hey y'all, welcome to the channel. Today we're checking out US versus the UK, what are the biggest differences, ?
We've been talking a lot about differences between the UK and the USA. What have you come to believe about?
Great question. I've watched countless videos about this very subject. Over 300. And I'm actually surprised that I'm still learning things. And I'm hearing people characterize it differently, and it's kind of fascinating. But before we get deep into it, who is this guy? Should I believe them? Or are they racist? Chris Williamson. Chris Williamson is an English podcaster, YouTuber, and former television personality. He appeared on the first series of Love Island in 2015. Since 2018, he has hosted the Modern Wisdom podcast, a show which has been downloaded more than 400 million times. Wow! Congratulations, Christopher. Williamson was born in 1988. I don't care. He played cricket as a child. Great. He went to Newcastle, where they make awesome beer. Doesn't he look like Giga Chad? He kind of looks like Giga Chad. He's a Giga Chad. Great work, Chris.
We've been talking a lot about differences between the UK and the USA. What have you come to believe about that?
So my biggest takeaway from being in America as a Brit is it's like finding out my dad had a kid with another woman that I never met. And we meet for the first time. And I'm like, you're kind of me, but you're not me. It's like he spent a bit more money on you. He made you believe in yourself. Your mom was clearly much nicer or kinder. And you go, oh, Americans, like we're kind of the same.
Yeah.
But
It's like Brits with self-belief.
Brits with self-belief is what Americans are.
That's sad, y'all.
There's lots of pros and there's lots of cons for both. But that was my overwhelming takeaway.
That's hilarious. Your dad's other family. He liked us better. Our mom's hotter. Spent more money on us. I could see it. Okay. Wait, who's this guy? George Mack? Who is he? GeorgeMack.com. He has a website. Oh, he's an essayist. Okay, fine. Tell me more, George.
The second biggest takeaway I have is that Brits don't really truly realize how impactful the British accent is until you leave Britain. And the metaphor I came up with for describing the British accent to Brits is, imagine everywhere else in the world, there's a salmon famine, right? And a British accent is like selling salmon. And the only place in the world where there's an abundance of salmon is in the UK. So if you're there using that, it basically gets you nothing in the UK. But you suddenly leave or go outside
anywhere
the UK,
else and you're exotic.
Anywhere else.
Oh,
and they think you're smarter. They think you're more attractive. Yeah.
Americans often ask me when they talk about that, and I do think it's true, that Brits have an unfair advantage in America of being seen as more learned. Like everyone presumes that we're part of the aristocracy or something. And they often ask me, well, what do you think of American accents in the UK? And that was a really interesting question. I was like,
yeah, is it the opposite? Do y'all think we're really dumb? I think y'all think we're really dumb. Maybe we are really dumb. What about a British accent like this? This doesn't seem too intelligent to me. Hey, how you doing? Right, all right. But I see what they're saying. Yeah, it does. Yeah, if someone comes up to me and they have a received pronunciation accent, I feel like they're above me in class. But that's not necessarily a good thing because it makes me resent them a little more. It makes me want to pull them down to my level. Let's get dumb. Let's get stupid.
American accents in the UK. And that was a really interesting question. I was like, I actually don't know. I think it's like...
Form an opinion, Chris.
Certainly for me, on girls, it's like kind of sexy. It feels that feels exotic in some way. Definitely energetic, overly enthusiastic and excitable.
I've been accused of that.
When you've got one American in a bunch of Brits. When you're the Brit in a bunch of Americans, oh, well, you know, everyone's just sort of excitable and first line cocaine energy. But when you drop one American in a like Newcastle or something, oh my God, who is that? It's a nuclear warhead surrounded by a bunch of swords.
Wow.
Yeah, I think
a nuclear warhead surrounded by swords. I'm a nuclear warhead? Yo, that's the greatest compliment I've ever received. I'm going to Newcastle, y'all. Let's party.
Since being here, you know, it's made me reflect on the UK. I hate being disparaging about the UK. Like, it's the country that gave me and you our start. We both went to university there. We both had our first jobs there. We both built businesses there. I think we're both in one form or another still registered. You'll be on Company's House in some vestigial old fucking thing. And I really wish that I didn't sort of talk badly about it, but you sent me a tweet last week and I've been watching Bald and Bankrupt. It's an awesome YouTube channel. I invited him on the show. He replied. He said he'd love to, but he's actually trying to actively wind down his public exposure. So he said he keeps getting asked for too many selfie photos in Tesco. And he does strike me as the kind of man that probably doesn't want to be overexposed.
I don't have that problem, do I? No. Bald and, what was it called? Bald and what?
Bald and Bankrupt.
Bald and Bankrupt. Well, he is bald. It's a travel vlog YouTube channel operated by Benjamin Rich, who is better known as Mr. Bald. Because he's bald, I guess. 4.08 million subscribers? Envy. He first started vlogging from India after filing for bankruptcy in the UK due to a failed business venture. Not adventure. Blah, blah, blah. Let's get a good look at his face. Be sure to bother him for a selfie if you see him in public in the UK, y'all. Or in America, or in India.
And he does strike me as the kind of man that probably doesn't want to be overexposed. You know, he was doing, for the people that don't know, this guy who does kind of like dark tourism stuff. He got trafficked across the border into Mexico. He was detained in a Russian jail for a while. And then he decided he was going to take on the final boss of dangerous places, which was seaside towns of the UK. And he just travels around sort of looking at all of these bad places. And you sent me that tweet last week, which I think nails it, which is the UK has the 6th largest economy in the world, but people are confused. The UK doesn't have the 6th largest economy in the world. London has the 6th largest economy in the world. It just has a really poor country attached to a very rich city.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. But it's all part of the same country, right? I mean, come on. California has the 3rd largest economy in the world, but it's a state in America, right? Doesn't it? I don't know. I'm talking out my booty. Go on, guys.
Attached to a very rich city.
Yeah. And then there was another one, which was US universities. So I think in the top 10 universities in the world, the UK has 3 and the US has 3. Yet the US outputs 5 times, those US universities output 5 times the number of entrepreneurs that those UK universities do. So in theory, these people are as intelligent as one another across that. I think it's Oxford, Cambridge, and another university.
King's, maybe Durham?
Maybe, yeah. And what's interesting when you go across global university rankings and outputs of entrepreneurs in the study that was shared, the UK university, which was Oxford, so that's the number 1 for entrepreneurial output, was 50th across the whole world.
50th.
Despite the fact we rank so high in education, yet actually transforming that into entrepreneurship doesn't seem to happen. And I wonder again whether that's the self-belief thing.
Yeah, entrepreneurship makes it seem like these are people who are starting businesses, you know? You don't have to be a genius to start a business. It's probably just the mindset of wanting to, the independent mindset, that American thing, you know? I bet that's what it is.
Doesn't seem to happen. And I wonder again whether that's the self-belief thing. You also see this weirdly, and I could be mistaken here. I have this bias that I think Brits are fundamentally more funnier than Americans. However, way more great stand-up comedians that are American than British. Like we have Ricky Gervais, we have Jimmy Carr, and then in terms of global appeal outside of that, there's not a huge amount more. And my theory behind that is, so why do you have the funniest people, yet not the biggest stand-up comedians out of those names there?
Less people?
And I think the same crabs in a bucket mentality that makes people so funny, because we can shoot people down and shoot ourselves down, is the same thing that makes it absurd as a concept to go and get on stage and say, I want to be a funny person.
So in the UK, if you're really, really funny, you might not be the kind of person who wants to get up on stage.
Like that in the UK. So I think the funniest guy in the world right now is probably in a Greg's in Wigan, or he is in a pub in Portsmouth.
That could be. That's a good
because
point.
Of that crabs in a bucket mentality, Americans are way more likely to get on stage and go, I want to be a funny person, because that's part of the American DNA. Meanwhile, the Brits, who I think are actually funnier, don't end up doing as much stand-up comedy.
Entrepreneurial
as well as
spirit.
entrepreneurial, yeah.
But you know, even within
That's
that sort of self-belief, it's one and the same. I think it's agency,
Yeah.
it's the preparedness to go against the grain, And you know, this we're going to talk about subprime audiences later on, but you know, this audience is like, I would say like it's full of like A's and double A's of people, especially the ones from the UK. And I think the reason that this resonates, I'm not saying it to disparage the UK, I don't think either of us are, but to kind of reassure the people for whom they feel a little bit like square peg in a round country, sat in the UK, you know, some normal town, you're in fucking Wakefield or Carlisle or Middlesbrough, Rochdale, wherever you are. And you think, God, you know, this is the sort of conversations I really love to have. These is the kind of thoughts that I think about, and I really want to have big dreams for myself. And then I just really struggle to resonate with the people around me. I really, really fail to do that. And I think I wish that I'd had, when I was younger, more reassurance that I wasn't the problem. You know, there's no value judgment. People that have big dreams, people that don't have big dreams, but there's nothing inherently wrong with you having those dreams. And there's no reason that you should be castigated or have the piss taken out of you because you want to do something different, because you don't intend being born, living, working, and dying within the same 20-mile radius of you know, where your parents grew up.
Yes. But even at a walking around level, you see this. So if you walk around America, there's flags everywhere. There's kind of pride in the nation. If you walk around the UK and you see a flag.
Proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And no other country is free like me, 'cause all the other countries are bees. I just made that up. What do you think? Don't let me know.
So if you walk around America, there's flags everywhere. There's kind of pride in the nation. If you walk around the UK and you see a flag, you go, oh, fuck.
EDL member.
There might be a Nazi, which is great. Unless there's a football tournament, then everybody does it. That's the...
What is EDL? What is that? Electro Dysfunction League, English Defense League, a far-right Islamophobic organization in England. Oh, okay. I like Jews. I like Palestinians. Let's all get together and...
There might be a Nazi, which is crazy. Unless there's a football tournament, everybody does it. That's the weird paradox of the UK.
Yeah.
So it's even at that level, you see this kind of pride at the nation level. And at the UK, it's almost like this weird autoimmune condition.
Do you have any idea why the British football team uses 3 lions rather than the St. George's Cross?
Don't know.
Isn't that interesting? Because I don't think Scotland does, and I don't think Ireland does, and I don't think Wales do. And I can't think of any other team. Actually, the England cricket guys will do the same thing. There must be a reason. Someone will be correcting me in the comments as we speak.
Let's look it up, Chris. That's what computers are for. Why does the British football team use the 3 lions instead of St. George's Cross? Southgate added that for him it was more important that the symbol of the 3 lions stayed on the shirt than the St. George's Cross. It's our iconic symbol. It is what distinguishes us not only from football teams around the world, but from England rugby and England cricket. All right.
Actually, the England cricket guys will do the same thing. There must be a reason. Someone will be correcting me in the comments as we speak. But that's, yeah, for the Americans that are listening, British national pride...
Yeah.
Like BNP, British National Pride. I know it's not that, but like it's just, it doesn't exist. And then you come over here and it is nice. It's nice to hear that people have got pride in their country.
So the probably the critique people have of us right now is that we're critiquing Britain way more than we are critiquing America. But I'd also point out that's part of being British. You're way more naturally to critique yourself and to critique other people. And I do love that side of being British because you're way more self-analytical.
Okay.
I think in terms of other differences between the UK and the US that I've noticed in terms of benefits for Brits is because Brits like take the piss out of one another on average way more. It means that you do have maybe that lowering self-belief, but you're almost a bit more anti-fragile. So if people do say a remark,
tough skin.
You've already cracked a joke worse than that in the past, or your friends have. Particularly, and I think the more northern in the country you go, the more
it is the further away from London that you get, the more piss you have taken out of you.
Exactly.
Interesting correlation. We do take the piss out of each other in America, but it's not. I have a feeling that the Brits do it more. Americans are fragile. You got to be careful with us. Don't take the piss out of me. Or sometimes it's fun, though. We do it. We take the piss out of our close friends, you know? We josh them. We give them a hard time. But it's out of love and laugh at ourselves, you know? It's healthy.
Often in the country you go, the more
It is the further away from London that you get, the more piss you have taken out of you.
Exactly. Whereas in America, I think people are a lot more, could be more fragile to comments like that. Whereas the Brits, the same way, I always say another difference. There's two big differences that I think explain the differences between Americans and Brits. So one is simple A/B test of when you meet an American and they're super enthusiastic and excited and the Brits aren't. If you actually go historically back, there was a simple A/B test, which is when the boats came and said, hey, there's this promised land far, far away. We can't show you a video because videos don't exist yet. You may die on the boat. Do you want to come and visit this crazy land? The Brits were the ones who were like, what a ridiculous idea that is. I'm going to stay here.
I'm staying in Skegness.
And the Americans were the ones who were like, yeah, bring it on. Yeah. And that A/B test fundamentally explains it.
I think he's right.
When you think about it.
That is a great A/B test. It could be that simple. Back then, there were people who wanted to go on the adventure and people who were like, hell no, that sounds too risky. Could be as simple as that. And then over time, those risk-averse people do it and have children, and here we are. Here I am.
As well as when you think about it, historically, Americans have, apart from Pearl Harbor, and that was quite far away from America, let's be honest, have never had an attack on their homeland in recent history.
9/11 not count?
The 9/11, yeah, there you go. That's one example. But comparing that to the bombing, like World War I and World War II, like the whole cities completely destroyed.
Yeah.
So there's definitely more like scar tissue built up that makes Brits, I think, a little bit more grittier in some regards than Americans as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
I'm pessimistic.
Yeah, I can tell. It's for certain people. I had this discussion with Piers Morgan. Piers was like, I like people bringing me back down to earth. I like the mockery and stuff. I'm like, Piers, that's great for you. It doesn't seem to work too well for me. Like my desperate requirement for validation and reassurance from the world, like wasn't being very satiated in Stockton, right, or Newcastle. And then you come over here. One of the best things, and this is something that anybody anywhere on the planet should do, and this is one of the coolest life hacks I've taken since being in America. And you've seen me do it to you, and you've like toe curled at a bunch of parties, which is when in America, at least in my group of friends, you are the new person in a group. Your friend that knows you and knows the group will introduce you and tends to do it in the best 30-second show reel of you that anybody could give. You know, he's got this amazing marketing agency. He's a phenomenal writer and he's pivoting. He's kind of champagne homeless at the moment. He does all of these things. And like, that's a really lovely gesture. It's your friend. It's an opportunity for them to do something nice for you. It gives you the best impression on the group. And it reminds you about what your friend kind of says about you behind your back when you're not there. And it's like, it inflates you a little bit and makes you feel good and warm.
Okay, yeah, I have had that.
What would the equivalent be if you were a British friend being introduced to British friends by a British friend?
It would be your worst ever story.
Correct.
Certainly the northern.
This is George. Shit himself last week. Like,
oh, that's great. That's so funny. So is that like a badge of honor? Like to have done something stupid in the last week? That's hilarious.
This is the northern thing, I think.
This is George. Shit himself last week. Like, you know what I mean? Still has wet dreams.
That's endearing, though.
Like, you know,
I could see how a closer connection could be formed from that because you know that this person is a piece of crap and they're human. They make errors, you know. Whereas in America, the introduction he was mentioning was like their best attributes and accomplishments.
It is interesting, like the introduction side, how we introduce one another. I've definitely found Americans are much better at selling themselves immediately, whereas I think Brits often downplay themselves immediately. There's a big difference there in terms of like ever so slight cultural differences.
I'm one of those Americans who does not sell themselves very well. It makes me uncomfortable to talk well about myself or like it feels like bragging, you know? I don't want to do that. Self-promotion feels gross.
Big difference there in terms of like ever so slight cultural differences. One of the reasons why I think America has been so successful so far, and one thing Britain could improve upon, is if you look at human beings, I think what makes human beings if you put one human being in a jungle, it's that classic phrase that you put one human being in a jungle and you've just introduced prey into the environment. But if you put 1,000 human beings into the jungle, you've just introduced a apex predator of which the world's never seen before. So the only thing that really makes us special, if you look at us, we don't hear that well compared to other animals. We're not that fast. We're not that strong. We're pretty shit across the board. But our ability to cooperate is what makes us unique. It's the classic Steve Jobs thing of, if you looked at, I think it's energy efficiency in movement, humans are so far down the rankings. Like there's so many animals ahead of us in terms of to do a mile, how much energy they need to burn. But if you look at a human being on a bicycle, like human beings are just blown through the charts. And he has this great quote, which is the computer is the bicycle of the mind. And if you then go back to, well, ultimately the only thing that makes...
Wow. So to travel a mile, humans walking burn a lot of energy. But on a bicycle, we're the best. We're the most efficient animal on the planet. It's our brain.
The computer is the bicycle of the mind. And if you then go back to, well, ultimately the only thing that makes us unique human beings, because we're shit about everything compared to other animals, is our ability to cooperate. If you have a more enthusiastic society that supports one another more, you can cooperate more, which means that you'll then have way more economic output, because in a certain country that's more optimistic that goes, I've got this idea, a load of naive Americans are like, great idea, let's do it tomorrow. Whereas a culture that's more maybe cynical means that those ideas don't happen, which I think explains why across these universities we have essentially the same IQ levels, the same intelligence levels.
Better accents,
more salmon, but 5x the number of entrepreneurs in America.
Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip, you will love the full-length 2-hour-long podcast with George, which is available right here.
So it comes down to cooperation. A bunch of people who are down to cooperate are going to get more done in general than a bunch of people who are not so down to cooperate. I haven't heard it put that way, but it kind of makes sense. These are broad generalizations too. Like, you know, not all Americans are like that, and not all British people are like that. I've met some very friendly, outgoing British people, and I've met some very pessimistic, risk-averse Americans. You know, this is made by 2 British people who now live in America, so there's probably a little bit of subconscious affirmation. I don't know what I'm talking about. The computer is the bicycle of the mind. I wonder how Britain would change if all of a sudden people became more enthusiastic or hopeful. The entertainment and art in Britain in the 1960s, probably a reflection of that a little bit, I would think. But I don't really know. Crazy that the only thing really that puts human beings on top is other human beings. I love where he mentions that one person in a jungle is prey. 1,000 people in a jungle is an apex predator because we can cooperate. That's fascinating. I never thought of that. It's true. But it all comes from back in the day. That A/B test. Do you want to go to this crazy land or not? Yeah, let's do it. Or hell no. Fascinating. This was great. Thank you all for watching this with me, and I'll see you next time. Later.